Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Coming up on tonight's Evan Miller Report, Turkey says a Syrian national helped those 3 British schoolgirls enter the country. This as Turkey opens fire to stop a Syrian migrant ship from entering their country. Last polls give the center-left opposition a solid lead before Israel's election. We have the latest numbers before the Israeli Prime Minister's election next week. North Korea fires missiles into the sea, again, says the South. Russia rejects U.S. concerns over a Vietnam base role in bomber pilots. This, as the EU is unlikely to extend Russia's sanctions next week. We have all those stories and more, plus Corey Evan.
Thank you as always, Jay. Iceland is putting its bid to join the EU on ice. Good move. Mr. Obama has chosen 6 cities to help him curb, quote, racial bias, unquote, in our continuing battle against global socialism. El Pollo Loco is spreading its wings and, well, they're opening up over 24 new stores, I'll say that. A teen who died after eating pancakes ends up the subject of a lawsuit across America. And John Madden is mad at Will Ferrell in entertainment. All that is coming up right now on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Friday, March the 13th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evan this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And tomorrow, if you spot me in Hollywood, feel free to stop me and ask for an autograph or ask me for my opinion on politics. Whatever you want, I'll be in Hollywood. If you spot me, say hello.
Corey Evan advertising. And of course, Corey Evan is probably already finished with tomorrow morning's fresh episode of the SHR Weekender, which airs at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, right here on the SHR Media Network. So we hope you tune in for that. Keep it
yes, and this week,
news.
This week it's going to be all about stories of folks who were in a bad situation and just happened to get lucky in that situation. You know, to support what's going on for St. Paddy's Day, the Ides of March. It's one of those weekends.
Should be an interesting weekend for that, including St. Paddy's Day. Get out your corned beef and cabbage, folks.
Ah, yes, good idea.
All right, folks. We'll be discussing more about festivities later on, what we might be doing, Corey and I. It's a possibility on tonight's program. Also coming up later in the program, if you missed last night's exclusive interview here on the Evan Miller Report with former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, we will be replaying that interview. For those of you who missed it last night, we will be playing an encore on that interview tonight on the Evan Miller Report. But first, we start off over in Turkey tonight, where they say 3 British schoolgirls who crossed into Syria to join the Islamic State group were helped by a Syrian national working as a spy for a country in the U.S.-led coalition. This, according to Turkey's foreign minister today. Meanwhile, video footage has emerged purportedly showing the agent helping the girls into a car in southeastern Turkey on their way to Syria. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu had unexpectedly announced Thursday Turkey's arrest of an intelligence agent who had helped the 3 teenage girls cross into Syria, amid frequent speculation over which intelligence agency the man was allegedly spying for. Cavusoglu refrained from giving any details in that regard. He said, quote, "The person arrested for us is someone working for an intelligence agency in the coalition," he said in televised comments in Ankara. The man is a Syrian citizen, he told reporters, alongside his Macedonian counterpart without specifying any further speculative remarks. The Ann Arbor television channel broadcast footage of the alleged spy, bearded and wearing glasses, held by two plainclothes officers as he was led into a court hearing and then a medical test. Separate Ann Arbor footage, also posted by the website of the Sabah Daily, showed the man meeting the three girls at what appears to be a bus station in southern Turkey and then putting them into a car to go then on to Syria. Sabah said the agent shot the footage himself, although it was not clear how the images had been obtained. Stay with the Evan Miller Report for the latest developments on this story, and of course, Corey Evan will give you the very latest on tomorrow's SHR Weekend News at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific time. And staying in Turkey, the Turkish Coast Guard opened fire to stop a cargo vessel carrying up to 337 Syrian migrants, or as we like to call them here in the U.S., let's say it together, Cor.
Illegals.
Ooh. Heading towards the European Union waters and arrested the suspected traffickers, a top local official said Friday. The Coast Guard on Thursday evening lodged an operation to chase down the 59-meter or 194-foot Dogan cartel as it headed through the Dartes Straits in the northeast of Turkey. The vessel initially paid no heed to the calls to stop, including warning shots, but was eventually forced to halt when the guards fired on the engines. The official told the Anatolia news agency it stopped when the engines were fired on and then came to a complete halt when the steering wheel was locked. Ahmed Senyar, the head of the western Kalkay province where the straits are located, told the agency he did not go into any further details on how the vessel was halted. Antonio said 337, mainly Syrian illegals, were on board the ship, including 85 children and 68 women. It said that two Turkish crew members identified as YY and NK, along with three suspected foreign organizers of the traffickers, were arrested. Traffic in the Dartes Straits, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, was temporarily halted during the operations. The Syrian refugees, or illegals, were taken off the ship and then housed in a sports hall in the nearby town of Jalol. Over to Israel now, where their center-left opposition is poised for an upset victory in next week's parliamentary election, with the last opinion polls before Tuesday's votes giving it a solid lead over current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's party. Final polls published by Israel's Channel 10 and Channel 2 on Friday evening, respectively, predicted the Zionist Union would win 24 and 26 seats against 20 and 22 for Netanyahu's Likud party, echoing earlier surveys which gave all the opposition a clear land. Polls in two of Israel's leading newspapers also predicted the Zionist Union would secure 25 or 26 seats in the 120 Knesset against the 21 or 22 for Likud party. All polls in the past 3 days have given the same margin of victory. No party has ever won an outright majority in Israel's 67-year history, making coalition building critical to the formation of any government in Israel. And stay with the Evan Miller Report. We'll keep an eye on next Tuesday's Prime Minister's election results as they come in here on the Evan Miller Report. Over to the Koreas now, where North Korea has test-fired another short-range missile, not just one, but 7, into the sea. This, according to South Korean officials, speaking today. In the latest such launches during ongoing South Korean U.S. military drills. The surface-to-air missiles launched late Thursday, which was last night, into Friday morning, into the morning here in the United States, flew into waters of the country's eastern coast, said a South Korean defense official who requested anonymity because of official policies in that country. A South Korean Joint Chief of Staff officer, who also did not want to be named, citing office rules as well, said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspected the missile test, but he refused to say how he obtained the information. Kim occasionally guides his military weapons test according to Pyongyang state media. North Korea routinely tests missiles, rockets, and artillery, but the latest law just came as the country reacts angrily to annual springtime military drills between South Korea, and the U.S., Pyongyang says. The drills are aimed at preparing to topple its government, though Seoul and Washington say they are purely defensive. A Pentagon spokesperson, Colonel Steve Warren, confirmed the launch of multiple surface-to-air missiles Friday, saying that they had fallen into the Sea of Japan. All right, over to Sweden now, where Swedish prosecutors have offered to travel to London to question WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange over sexual assault allegations. Prosecutors have previously insisted on questioning Mr. Assange in Sweden after seeking his arrest back in 2010. Mr. Assange denies the assault claims, has been living at the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012. He fears that if he is sent to Sweden, he could then be extradited to the U.S., where he faces charges over leaking materials in the WikiLeaks saga. A lawyer for Mr. Assange, Per Samuelson, welcomed the move. He has said, quote, "He is willing to cooperate fully now in conducting this interrogation. This is a great victory for him," he told the BBC's World Service. "We've been waiting for this for over 4 years," he continued. The lead Swedish prosecutor explained the change of strategy by saying some potential charges against Mr. Assange would expire under the statute of limitations upcoming in August of this year. He said, quote, "My view has always been that to perform an interview with him at the Ecuadorian embassy in London would lower the quality of the interview," Murray said in a statement. He continued to say, "Now that time is of essence, I viewed it therefore necessary to accept such deficiencies in the investigation and likewise take the risk that the interview does not move the case forward." Mr. Assange, an Australian journalist and activist, has not been formally charged, but prosecutors want to question him over allegations of rape and sexual misconduct, as we were ordered before, made by 2 women he met during a trip to Sweden in August of 2010. Mr. Nye said she had made a request to Mr. Assange's legal team to take a DNA sample from him to London, as well as conducting questioning. Mr. Samuelson said the request will need to be discussed since his client has already left a DNA sample with UK police back in 2010. Over to Russia now, where that country on Friday rejected the U.S.'s concerns about its use of a former American base in Vietnam for the refueling of Russian bomber flights around U.S. territory in the Pacific, dismissing recent U.S. statements as puzzling and strange. Reuters and ITN have reported earlier this week that the United States had asked Vietnam to stop letting Russia use Vietnam's Cam Ranh Bay for tanker aircraft that had refueled nuclear-capable bombers engaged in shows of strength over the Asia-Pacific region. It is strange to hear such statements from representatives of the state whose armed forces are permanently stationed in a number of Asia-Pacific countries and which continues to increase its level of military activity in the region, Russia's defense ministry said. It said U.S. statements that the refueling of Russian bombers for Vietnam could lead to increased regional tensions was, quote, puzzling. Not so puzzling if you're living in the U.S. Remnants of the Cold War. That's this newsman's opinion. Back to the story, though. The ministry said Russian Air Force activities and cooperation with Vietnam were carried out in strict accordance with international norms, and bilateral agreements are not directed against anyone whosoever and shall not be a threat to peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. End of quote. Russia's defense ministry said back on January the 4th that Russian 78 tanker aircraft had used Cam Ranh Bay in 2014, enabling the refueling of a nuclear-capable Tu-95 Bear strategic bombers. Statement also reported in Vietnam state-controlled media. Yesterday, U.S. State Department spokeswoman and BS artist Jan Psaki said the United States did not want Russia to use Cam Ranh Bay. She said, quote, "We have urged Vietnamese officials to ensure that Russia is not able to use its access to Cam Ranh Bay to conduct activities that could raise tensions in the region," she told a regular news briefing. Staying with Russia, EU leaders are unlikely to decide at a summit next week to extend economic sanctions against Russia over the current crisis in Ukraine, which expires in July, according to a European official on Friday. The European Union imposed tough sanctions targeting sectors including Russia's banks and its oil industry after the shooting down of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over rebel-held eastern Ukraine in July 2014. But the bloc's 28 member states are divided about extending them or exposing new sanctions, especially as many want to give a further chance to a shaky ceasefire in Ukraine that started last month. I don't think there is anonymity for the rollover of economic sanctions, said a European official on condition of anonymity ahead of the summit on Thursday and Friday of next week. The leaders have until July to make a final decision on extending those sanctions. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and take a short break here on the program, but when we return this evening on the program, Boko Haram, we have more on Boko Haram as South Africa is concerned about Nigerian mercenaries tonight. And Haiti sets a date for long overdue elections tonight. Thousands back Dilma Rousseff, the Brazilian president, despite the Petrobras scandal with that oil company. And President Obama says he's embarrassed by GOP politicians for sending that letter to Iran. We have all those stories and more when we return on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. And here's Corey Evan on what's coming up in tonight's Lawsuits Across America.
Yes. In addition to going back to the classroom for today's Lawsuits Across America, including one involving a teenager who died after eating pancakes, we also have Cinderella topping expectations in less than a day at the box office in entertainment. And in business, look out, KFC. El Pollo Loco has business news that has Jason feeling the Mexcellence. Lols. That's all coming up after the break on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
News. Radio. News.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's radio.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan will be back in just a couple minutes with more on Iceland changing their mind on a deal with the EU today. But first, here on the program, the South African government is concerned its nationals may be working as mercenaries in Nigeria in the war against the Boko Haram militant group. Nigerian government spokesman Mike Omori told the BBC that foreigners were training troops in the use of new weapons. Nigeria has recently bought helicopter gunships and tanks from South Africa and former Soviet Union countries. But the South African government says the men may be involved in fighting. Nigeria and its neighbors have recently recaptured several towns and villages from Boko Haram, which is allied to Islamic State. Thousands of people have been killed, mostly in northeastern Nigeria, since it began its insurgency back in 2009. It is against the law for South Africans to fight overseas for private gain. This coming from South Africa's Defense Minister, Nosko Maskov Nafki, who told BBC News that anyone suspected of fighting in Nigeria would be investigated by the South African Police Force. No serving member of South Africa's armed forces were in Nigeria, the minister also added. The presence of South African mercenaries was first reported by a South African newspaper back in January, and speculation intensified after a photograph circulated on Twitter last week showing a white man in khaki t-shirt and body armor next to a heavy caliber machine gun. The location of the photo was later identified as a Maiduguri in the northeast Nigeria, close to the fighting with Boko Haram. Haiti has set dates for elections which have been repeatedly delayed. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen. Elections for 2/3 of the Senate and Chamber of Deputies will be on August the 9th, with the presidential and municipal vote following on October the 25th, Haiti's Electoral Council said. President Michel Martelly is barred from running again by the country's constitution. The opposition has accused him of abusing his powers in order to rule by presidential decree. Well, we just call it what it is here at the Evan Miller Report. It's a dictatorship. Parliament was dissolved back in January over its failure to hold elections, leaving Haiti without a fully functioning government. Midterm Senate elections had been due back in May 2012, while the municipal poll is 3 years behind schedule. The delay was caused by a standoff between the president and some opposition senators over an electoral law which would make the vote possible. Street protests calling for Mr. Martelly's resignation over the delayed vote have intensified, with demonstrators angry by high petrol prices. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world and is still struggling with the legacy after a devastating earthquake back in 2010. All right, going to send it over to Corey Evan now. He has more on Iceland thinking about changing its mind and joining the EU. Corey, tell us more.
Oh, yes. I'm happy about this news from the BBC, from the Hindu, The North Atlantic island of Iceland has withdrawn its bid to join the EU, with the government saying that its interests are best served outside the 28-nation EU. The EU spokesman, Maja Kochijancic, said on Friday that the bloc would fully respect such a decision and underlined that Iceland remained an important partner. Iceland started its membership negotiations in 2010, looking to better anchor itself in Europe 2 years after its economy imploded amid a banking collapse. The biggest challenges to those talks were fishing rights and agriculture. The new government froze the EU accession application when it came to power in 2013. Iceland's foreign ministry had announced on Thursday that the application was withdrawn. Very good move, Iceland. Stay away from the EU. They are nothing but trouble. Moving on to one from the BBC, Cyclone Pam battered Vanuatu with winds of up to 170 miles an hour today. Authorities on the islands had earlier issued a red alert to residents after the cyclone changed direction and began moving toward populated areas. It's already caused major damage on other Pacific islands, including Kiribati and the Solomon Islands. Tuvalu, a group of 9 tiny islands northeast of Vanuatu, has also declared a state of emergency after the cyclone caused flash floods there. There were unconfirmed reports that 44 people had died in Panama province in the northeast of Vanuatu, the UNOCHA said in a statement on Friday, according to Reuters. Meanwhile, Category 3 Cyclone Olwyn has hit the coast of Western Australia with wind gusts up to 120 miles an hour. People in the state's coastal region were warned to move to higher ground to escape dangerous flooding. Cyclone Pam destroyed homes and flooded crop areas in Kiribati and the Solomon Islands before moving on to Vanuatu and Tuvalu. At least 3,000 households were said to have been affected. Then the Vanuatu Meteorological Services said it expected torrential rainfall, flash flooding, landslides, and storm surges. Stay with us here at the Evan Miller Report. We will keep an eye on this cyclone, and we will bring you updates as soon as they become available. And Jason's got something out of Brazil now? Anything other than Brazil nuts?
Brazil nuts, that's funny. It would be funny if the story wasn't so serious. Back with Corey Evans.
Unfortunate.
He'll have the latest on the national news in just a moment. Thank you very much, sir. Thousands of government supporters across Brazil have been taking part in marches to show their backing for President Dilma Rousseff. The opposition has called Ms. Rousseff's impeachment over a huge corruption scandal in the state-owned oil company Petrobras. Most of the politicians accused of taking bribes are from Brazil's governing coalition. Anti-government marches are expected to take place on Sunday. Ms. Rousseff was head of Petrobras for 7 years, and when much of the corruption is believed to have taken place, but she has not been implicated in the corruption scandal as of yet. Government supporters say the calls for impeachment less than 4 months after she was reelected to a second 4-year term amounts to a coup attempt. Pro-government demonstrators are going ahead in 14 Brazilian states. Most of them have been called by pro-unions that support the governing Workers' Party. One citizen, who I'm not going to name, but I will say who is 69 years old, said, "I am here to prevent that they take away the social benefits we have earned." Another said, "We can't blame Dilma. The congressmen are to blame. She doesn't govern on her own," said one to Global newspaper. Last week, the Supreme Court approved the investigation of 54 people for their alleged involvement in the kickback scheme. The list was prepared by the Attorney General, Rodrigo Janot, who alleged that private companies paid corruption officials in order to get lucrative Petrobras contracts. And that's a wrap of tonight's international news. Now time for the national news. All right, over to U.S. news now, and I'll start off tonight with President Obama saying he was embarrassed for Republicans who signed a controversial letter warning Iran's leaders about reaching a nuclear deal with the White House. He said, quote, "I'm embarrassed for them." In an interview with Vice Media, which is expected to be released on Monday, he continued to say, quote, "For them to address a letter to Astolia, who they claim is our mortal enemy, and their basic argument to them is don't deal with our president because you can't trust him to follow through on an agreement, it's close to unprecedented. 47 Senate Republicans, including several potential 2016 presidential candidates, signed the open letter to Iran's supreme leader published earlier this month. Republicans warned any deal agreed before Obama leaves office in 2017 is nothing more than an executive agreement between President Obama and Ayatollah Khamenei. The next president could revoke such an executive agreement that with the stroke of a pen, and future Congresses could modify the terms of the agreement any time, they added. With the March deadline looming, negotiators are furiously working to agree on a deal that would curb Iran's nuclear program in return for reducing Western sanctions. All right, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Corey Evan, and he has the rest of the day's news. Corey?
Thank you, Jay. A medical helicopter carrying 3 people crashed in a rural area of Oklahoma late Thursday, killing a pilot, the transport company said. A nurse and a paramedic survived the crash. The Airbus AS-350 went down about 11:30 p.m. local time near the city of Eufaula while flying from Tulsa to McAllister. The aircraft is registered to Eagle Med LLC, a medical transport company. All of those aboard were employees of the company. Matthews died at the scene. That's according to McIntosh County Emergency Management Director Wesley Dawson. This is the 3rd fatal crash Eagle Med has suffered in the past 5 years. In 2010, a pilot and nurse were killed, and in 2013, another pilot and nurse were killed. A 15-year-old boy walking home from school was stabbed to death for his backpack, California authorities said. Keshawn Brooks was assaulted as a suspect tried to snatch his bag Thursday afternoon outside Stevens Middle School in Long Beach, police said. Long Beach, California. The suspect ran off. Brooks, a freshman at nearby Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo High School, was given first aid by witnesses before paramedics arrived. The teen was rushed to hospital, where he was pronounced dead from serious stab wounds. After interviewing witnesses, investigators named 18-year-old Giovanni Montalongo as a suspect. He was taken into custody Thursday evening at a Long Beach residence on suspicion of murder, according to police spokeswoman Nancy Pratt. Yes. Students at the middle school, police said. Investigators and Brooks' father implored any witnesses to come forward. Montalongo was held without bail as a requirement of one of 3 outstanding warrants unrelated to Thursday's incident, Pratt said. The warrants were sealed because the previous alleged offenses occurred while he was a juvenile, she said. Pratt didn't know if Montalongo has a lawyer. He was scheduled to be arraigned on Monday. The Long Beach Unified School District was providing grief counselors for students today. Stay with us at the Evan Miller Report. If any updates come up, I will let you know about them. And now, where are those closing bells, Jay? Excellent. There we are. The Dow lost 145 points to close at 17,749. Ooh, it's back down below 18,000. That's not good. The Nasdaq lost 21 points at 48.71, and S&P 500 suffered a 12-point loss as well at 20.53. The prices that businesses received for goods and services unexpectedly fell in February for the 4th straight month, in a sign that inflation remains extremely low as the economy struggles to return to normal growth. The Producer Price Index declined 0.5% in February, according to the U.S. Labor Department. The drop was an improvement over January's 0.8 plunge, but that decrease, the largest one-month decline since the department revised its methodology in 2009, was driven sharply by lower oil prices. Those prices stabilized in February, and economists had expected the Producer Price Index to increase 0.3% last month, but prices for food and other goods and services fell, causing the decline. The report provided another worrisome signal for Fed policymakers as they consider if the economy is strong enough to raise interest rates. Although job growth has improved, they say, Fed officials remain concerned that inflation is running well below the central bank's annual 2% target. The Fed uses a different inflation measure based on personal consumption expenditures, but producer prices offer a view of inflation on the wholesale side of the economy. For the 12 months ended February 28th, producer prices had declined 0.6%. That year-over-year figure had been flat in January. The Russian central bank cut its main lending rate on Friday, sending a strong signal that it now sees the rapidly declining economy as a more serious worry than high inflation. The bank reduced its one-week auction repo rate by 1 point to 14%, continuing an easing cycle that began in January when it unexpectedly cut the rate by 2 points, according to Reuters. This time, economists had broadly expected Friday's move as the downturn gains pace due to the low international price of oil, Russia's main export, and Western sanctions imposed over Moscow's role in the Ukraine conflict. The ruble has stabilized since a panicky collapse late last year, giving the bank breathing room to continue easing. Data over the past few weeks showed that consumer spending, investment, real wages, and GDP are all sinking even faster than many had expected, indicating that the economy is heading into a steep recession. And forget that old adage, beef, it's what's for dinner. These days, it's all about chicken. El Pollo Loco, according to CNN Money,
chicken.
Yes, Jay, definitely loving that chicken. The Mexican-style chicken, for those who had never had Mexican chicken from El Pollo Loco before, that's the place to get it, apparently. They went public in July, and they may only have restaurants in the Southwest, but it's taking Wall Street by storm. Again, the buzz keeps growing for El Pollo Loco, which revealed very strong sales Thursday after the bell. The stock surged 13% in trading Friday. That's an especially great feat considering the rest of the market was undergoing a sell-off. El Pollo Loco is capitalizing on a growing Hispanic population, and in Jay's case, the desire for healthier food. It's known for its grilled chicken, while competitor KFC is struggling to shed its fried chicken image. Yeah, good luck with that in your KGC. New menu items like stuffed quesadillas and Baja shrimp have also been a hit, helping to drive spending and store traffic solidly higher. El Pollo Loco enjoyed a 55% surge in fourth quarter earnings as sales jumped nearly 8%. The growth story is likely to continue. Now El Pollo Loco is expanding beyond its California roots by opening 3 stores in Houston and announcing plans to roll out a total of 27 this year. For a lot of investors, this stock looks and smells a lot like Chipotle, the massive restaurant success story of recent years, thanks to its popularity with millennials and its reputation as a healthier choice. So, Jay, how about that? Your El Pollo Loco, making it onto Wall Street. Maybe we ought to buy stock in El Pollo Loco.
I'm seriously thinking about it, and I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I have a relative visiting in town, and she decided to bring up some El Pollo Loco chicken on Wednesday. And I can tell you, that's some good chicken, ladies and gentlemen. Some damn good chicken.
Absolutely is.
Giving KFC a run for their money, I'll tell you. I'll go as far to say that.
Right. Well, at least in one case up in Big Bear, I had El Pollo Loco, and it wasn't the best portioning at that restaurant, but maybe that's just a one-off. I've got to hit them up one of these times just to verify.
I think they're probably a bit better now than they were back then up in Big Bear.
Yeah, I think they've got breathing room now to increase portion sizes as appropriate.
Absolutely. So they got a great mixed rice. They had Spanish rice. That was good. They got some beans. Even had a nice salad, which was great. And the thing I love about El Pollo Loco, they provide churros. I love those churros.
Delicious stuff.
Yeah, top that off for dessert, Mr. Evan, and woof, you got a great meal going right there. So
yeah, and at least it satisfies your El vegetable requirement with the ensalada from Ensenada, as I like to call it.
Very nice. What else you got in biz?
That's what I've got in business today. I think it's
time for your continuing battle against what?
Global socialism. Global socialism. Right. There we are. 6 cities will participate in a federal pilot program aimed at reducing racial bias and improving ties between law enforcement and communities, Attorney General Eric Holder said Thursday. The cities are Fort Worth, Texas, Cary, Indiana, Stockton, California. Oh, the bankrupt city is on the list. Birmingham, Alabama. Well, I'm not surprised at that one. Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The announcement of their selection came 6 months after Holder revealed the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice, or NIBCTJ, as I like to abbreviate it, in the aftermath of the Ferguson police shooting last August. As part of the almost $5 million project, researchers will study data and conduct interviews to develop plans for curbing bias and strategies for building trust between residents and law enforcement. And separately, the Justice Department said it would offer extra training and help to communities that are not part of the program, which is part of the Obama administration's My Brother's Keeper initiative aimed at minority men. Weeks of protests that followed the shooting of Michael Brown, an unarmed black 18-year-old by a white police officer in Ferguson, exposed the frayed relations between that community and law enforcement and underscored the need for a nationwide initiative, Holder has said. Of course he's going to say that. The department last week cleared the officer, Darren Wilson, of criminal civil rights charges in that shooting, but also released a scathing report that detailed a slew of discriminatory policing practices in Ferguson and a profit-driven criminal justice system. Since that report, Holder said... Yeah, they say that Holder has seen signs of progress and a community willing to create change.
Oh boy, our favorite word. Obama uses the word change, and now it's like the most popular word in the dictionary. I wish the guys can pull up their pants better than they can say the word change. And I'm speaking about the guys who walk with their pants half hanging off their you-know-what, and I don't need to say what the you-know-what is.
Yeah, I think you'd be a fan of that one-off from American Idol, the pants-on-the-ground guy. I'll send it to you later.
Thank you.
Yeah, Holder condemned the shootings of 2 police officers early Thursday in front of the Ferguson PD, calling it a pure ambush and the act of a, quote, damn punk, unquote, that may have been intended to unravel progress that's been made. And I've got one out of India before I send it over to Jason with his story of global socialism out of Germany. Another vermin German insult, I assure you. A bride in India ditched her wedding after finding out her groom was terrible at math. According to the BBC,
really?
Yeah, I know. Lovely Singh, what a lovely name for such a woman, requested that her groom, Ram Baran, solve a simple math problem, asking him to add 15 and 6. 21. When the man replied 17, the bride called it all off. Family members from both sides tried to convince Lovely to go through with the big day, but she stood firm, saying she refused to marry a man who was illiterate, according to reports. Police arrived at the event to help mediate, eventually getting the families to give all the wedding gifts back to the guests. Mohar Singh, who arranged the marriage between his daughter Lovely and Baran, said that the groom's family hid his lack of education. When Lovely found out her groom may not be as smart as he let on, she decided to give him the arithmetic problem as a test. Man, getting back to the common crud. That's what I have to say about this.
And I'm not saying I'm not sticking up for this guy in any way, but come on, calling off a wedding. The guy was probably nervous as hell. The wedding's probably coming up a day or so. Whenever the wedding is coming up, he's probably nervous, and it's like, come on, woman. It's like, and like I said, well, the guy may have got the math problem wrong, but to call off the whole wedding because he got a math problem wrong, I'm sure he would have said, hey, I'm sorry, dear. I'm having a bit of a bad day. It's like, call off the whole wedding because of that. I'm glad her side of the family did try to mend relations despite what happened. At least we know this is not a family-wide thing, that this happened just because of the bride. So all I say to the bride over in India, you're going to be an old maid one day if that's the way you're going to get married one day.
Yeah, especially with their prejudice, it seems, against unmarried women out there. Because I have heard horror stories out there about how they treat women who aren't married beyond a certain age or widows, that sort of thing.
It's an old stereotype there, Corey Evan, and sometimes old traditions do not change, and that's a very bad tradition.
Yes, let's just hope that Lovely will have some sort of change of heart in the coming days, and if she does, I'll let you know, but I'm not going to hold my breath on this one.
Neither am I.
Yeah, so what do you got out of Germany?
Yes. Well, the Federal Constitutional Court in Germany has overruled the general prohibition of headscarves in German schools. Rightly so, says Christopher Stark. Krassol's decision backs positive religious freedom in an open society, he said. The decision is one, and it is groundbreaking in Germany's high courts as they prohibit states from banishing practicing Muslims from teaching if they wear headscarves. The ruling makes clear that the court backs the religious freedoms of teachers and admonishes the states. A headscarf can mean as much to practicing Muslim as a habit to a nun, or a yarn-like to a Jewish man. One cannot prohibit one religious group something that others are allowed, like things that must be treated alike. Mind you, this is solely about religious symbols and thus the fundamental right of freedom of religion and conscience, said some. Now, the decision is not really surprising, but it's nonetheless impressive as the judges have in effect corrected their own judiciary. In 2003, the court's Second Senate upheld the right of states to prohibit teachers from wearing headscarves if there are corresponding state laws in place. The First Senate has now overturned that precedent. One could say that one Senate is more conservative and other more liberal, but between these decisions lie 12 years of time, a period in which they say Islam in Germany and in which Germany has to a degree accepted the religion. So out of this, that's shoving Islam down people's throats. So people in Germany, I'd be careful sending your kids over to a public school. They may be indoctrinated with Islamic crap, as I would like to say.
Unfortunately.
All right. And it's time for one of Corey's famous end quotes.
So, where in the world are children safe from indoctrination? Where in the world am I going to be able to find examples of folks who do not endorse gay marriage? And seriously, where the heck can I find the phone number for 1-800-LONE-MART? Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
All right, Corey Evan, ending off with tonight's global socialism. And we're going to go ahead and take a short break here on the Evan Miller Report. But when we return, Corey Evan will have tonight's Lawsuits Across America and the Entertainment Report. We'll be right back on the Evan Miller Report.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends. I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you as always, Pat. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Come to order. Lawsuits Across America is now in session for this Friday. First item on the docket, alumni of the Sigma Alpha Epsilon chapter at the University of Oklahoma have hired a high-profile lawyer to help reinstate the disbanded fraternity, according to USA Today. During a press conference this afternoon, Stephen Jones, who represented Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh, said the alumni are not ruling out suing the university, but are hoping to protect the rights of their members. He said fraternity members have been harassed and threatened with physical assault on campus since video surfaced of some members singing a racist chant. 2 students who were seen in the video leading the chant have withdrawn from the school. The National Office of SAE disbanded the chapter after the video surfaced and University President David Boren evicted its members from its fraternity house. Jones said the eviction has raised questions about whether the university is legally entitled to take that action. He said the chapter owns the land and the university has some kind of legal claim on the house. There are also questions about whether the fraternity received due process before it was disbanded, Jones said. He worries that the members' First Amendment rights were violated, though he was quick to characterize the chant as inexcusable. Jones said he has talked with the fraternity's national office, which has a process of appealing the decision. He says he wants to have similar conversations with university officials who he believes acted too hastily. So, Mr. Jones, don't you make up your mind? Is it going to be the fraternity at fault, or is it going to be the university? Because it sounds like you're kind of on the fence, but then again, Timothy McVeigh, so I'm not surprised. Next up, out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, from Michigan Live, a fifth grader's suspension for alleged sexual harassment has led his mother to sue Grand Rapids Public Schools, accusing the district of failing to properly investigate the claim and give the child a chance to prove his innocence. Tanisha Tyson and her son, identified in federal court records as John Doe, also accused the school of harming his reputation by labeling the child a sexual harasser. The student was first accused of making obscene comments and gestures to a classmate in October of 2013 during a phone call from the alleged victim's father to campus elementary principal Bernard Colton. Colton summarily and arbitrarily characterized the alleged comments and gestures as sexual harassment, suspending the boy for 10 days without determining if the actions took place, the lawsuit states. Tyson, through her attorney Kevin Floyd, claims the incident was never reported to the district's Title IX officer as mandated by law. The lawsuit alleges that the district deliberately disregarded the obligation to inform the family of the procedure by which Doe could timely contest the suspension decision or the characterization of the alleged conduct as sexual harassment. A second harassment complaint against the boy in March 2014 was handled in a similar manner and was retaliatory for the contesting of the first suspension, the suit claims. The fifth graders was accused of touching a female girl on her buttocks and again was denied the accusation. The district moved to expel the boy, and administrators allegedly rejected or ignored Tyson's efforts to have Colton's decision reviewed. Superintendent Teresa Weatherall Neal did not meet with Tyson on September 11, 2014, but she did not overturn the decision, according to the lawsuit. She did meet with Tyson, but didn't overturn the decision. That's what it says. In addition to violating Title IX rules, the lawsuit alleges the district denied the boy due process. Besides suing the district, the lawsuit also names Neal, Johnson, and Colton as defendants, as well as Rick Noel, Executive Director of Elementary Schools and Early Childhood Education, and Mel Atkins Jr., Executive Director of Community and Student Affairs. John Hemholt, the district's spokesman, declined comment. And a Minnesota family has filed a lawsuit against a restaurant for what they're calling a fatal mistake. They say they were told the establishment's pancakes were dairy-free. Their son had a severe dairy allergy and died after a meal at the restaurant. Scott Johnson's mother, Cindy Johnson, go on to say that his smile was the brightest when he was left to explore Minnesota's lakes and woods. Scott was the second of 4 children in a family that always looked out for him, and Scott suffered from a severe dairy allergy since birth. He had had scares before. Small traces of dairy would be enough to send him to the emergency room. That's why his family said eating at a restaurant became rare, and it would always be done with caution, so as to avoid the International House of Pathetic. I guess it's worth mentioning, Jason. Yeah, I was just referring to a restaurant that you don't like as the International House of Pathetic, and I guess we could call the restaurant that if it turns out they are indeed guilty. But at any rate, on a weekday morning in June 2014, family members wanted to treat their mom and brother to breakfast at the Minnesota Nice Cafe. The family's lawsuit explains what they say happened next. Cindy Johnson asked the server if their restaurant's gluten-free pancakes were also dairy-free. The server reported that they were after checking with the cook. Cindy then told the server the grill would have to be cleaned before her son's pancakes were made. Scott's mom and sisters watched him eat the pancakes, thinking they were fine. Scott forgot to bring his EpiPen and nebulizer to the restaurant, the tools he'd used before to open his lungs and help him through an allergic reaction. When the Johnsons got home, it became clear it wasn't working. Cindy called 911. On a road construction job 2 hours away, Steve got word his son would be airlifted to Fargo, Minnesota. Doctors told his parents that their son had suffered a severe anaphylactic reaction, his heart has failed, and Scott died 3 days later. The Johnsons are sharing their story with the hope it will stop something like this from happening again. And I certainly hope it doesn't happen again, because we do not need for this sort of thing to be happening, because there are a lot of hardworking folks in the food service industry, and I bet this does not reflect them in any way, shape, or form. And on that note, it's time to declare lawsuits across America case dismissed.
Load of lawsuits across America today. Corey Evan, thank you very much for that. And Corey Evan has the latest in entertainment now, and Cinderella starting off with a bang today.
Yes, Cinderella already brought in over $20 million on her first day in the theaters, and it could approach $25 million for today, and somewhere around $70 to $75 million for the whole weekend. Disney insiders are being more cautious, suggesting in the high $60 million range. Either way, the $95 million film, fueled by females of all ages, marks another victory in the studio's campaign to spin its classic animated titles into live-action offerings. In May of last year, Disney's Maleficent debuted to a stellar $69.4 million, thanks in no small measure to Angelina Jolie. Cinderella's performance is all the more impressive considering its leading lady, Downton Abbey's Lily James, isn't a known quantity. James stars opposite Cate Blanchett, Helena Bonham Carter, and Richard Madden. I assume Bonham Carter is the evil queen that tries to poison our fair maiden. No, wait. Oh, Cate Blanchett. I've got it wrong. I've got my stories backward a little bit. I saw a photo on here and I got confused. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Thank goodness Jason spotted that.
Corey Evan. It must be Friday, because Corey Evans is naming entertainment stars. That don't happen too often.
Yeah, that's a result of lack of sleep, I assure you. I do 2 jobs, not just this one. Anyway, Andy Samberg is taking center stage at the Emmy Awards. According to the AP, Fox said Thursday that the star of the network's sitcom Brooklyn Nine-Nine will host the September ceremony. In a statement, Samberg said, quote, "Buckle your seatbelts, Emmy viewers," and promises the audience a wild ride. Samberg has an Emmy track record. The former SNL player starred in and co-wrote the lyrics for a satirical SNL music video that won an 2007 trophy. The video with JT was about a memorable X-rated Christmas gift in a box. Would that happen to be the leg lamp? At any rate, NBC late-night host Seth Meyers hosted the Emmys last year when the ceremony aired on his home network. The 67th Primetime Emmy Awards will air September 20th from the Nokia Theater in LA. Next up, Eric Clapton will celebrate his day with 2 shows at Madison Square Garden in May. The iconic guitarist announced Thursday that he will perform at the famed New York City venue May 1st and 2nd. He turns 70th on March 30th. Clapton, a former member of the Yardbirds and Cream, has performed at MSG more than 40 times. Clapton will be accompanied by his band members Paul Carrick, Steve Gadd, Sharon White, and Michelle John at the MSG shows. The concert dates could change due to the NBA. But of course, we all knew that. And before I go to the rest of the box office numbers coming up this weekend, rapper Lil Wayne marched off stage during a gig in Florida on Thursday following an apparent technical mix-up. The Lollipop hitmaker, real name Dwayne Carter, was performing at the Nova Southeastern University when the DJ appeared to accidentally play the wrong track, prompting the star to throw down his microphone and walk off. Lil Wayne was reportedly waiting for an instrument of OT Genesis's hit Coco, to which he could rap a remix, but the DJ mistakenly played the original version. Oh, for crying out loud, Lil Wayne. That's when you improvise, you know? Do something off the cuff, but then again, knowing Lil Wayne, off the cuff probably means something highly inappropriate. Am I right or am I right, Jay?
Trying to pull something out of his patootie, and his patootie probably ain't that smart these days.
No, it's not. In addition to Cinderella, Run All Night is coming up this weekend with Liam Neeson and Ed Harris, and It Follows with Micah Monroe and Keir Gilchrist. That's the name of it. It Follows. It has a high rating on the tomato meter. That's what it says here. Any rate, Chappie with Shalto Copley and Dev Patel is the number 1 from last week with 13.3 million, but has since been easily eclipsed by Cinderella. Focus brought in 10 million last week, and the second best exotic, Marigold Hotel, 8.5 million. Not a bad job, Judi Dench, but you've got stiff Teutonic competition this weekend. Good luck to you. Right, that's your entertainment report for today. I will see you guys on the SHR Weekender at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific tomorrow. Till then, I'm Corey Evans saying, Jay, take it away, because I gotta get back to work.
There you go. That's Corey Evans, ladies and gentlemen, and thank him very much, and he'll be back, as he said, for the SHR Weekend News, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific tomorrow on the SHR Media Network. All right, folks, we know some people were busy yesterday, did not happen to catch my exclusive interview with former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. So what we're going to do on the Evan Miller Report, since we have time tonight, we are going to go ahead and replay that full interview now here on the network. There is my exclusive interview with former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Enjoy. I'll be back to close off the program as soon as this interview's over. Enjoy. All right, folks, it's the big interview of the week here on the SHR Media Networks and the Evan Miller Report. Joining us in her first exclusive radio interview since she left Congress is former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann of the great state of Minnesota. And I know the way you guys say it in Minnesota, Michelle, probably is a lot different than we folks here in Southern California usually say it.
Well, as I always say, it is the accent everyone wished they had. It's called Minnesota.
See, and I will never, ever say that right, being from the West Coast. We thank you for joining us. Quick story before we discuss politics. I happened to meet you twice, once at an Eagle Forum event in San Diego, and then once during the last presidential campaign in 2012 when you were running for president over at the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. I happened to be one of the audience members in the audience, and when you were speaking about one of your primaries, I happened to be the one who broke the trend and decided to say that you would be winning one of the primaries over there, and the NBC people over there were not too kind to me in saying that you were going to win that primary, but sure enough, you won that primary that you were talking about, that Jay was bringing up, and so shows to tell you that the Evan Miller Report can predict certain elections.
Well, congratulations, batting 1,000.
Yes, absolutely. We try our best here, and of course, everybody wants to know. The first question I got to ask you is, will you be running for president again?
Well, not today. I don't have a plan right now to do that. I'm definitely involved, definitely weighing in. I just was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and I meet with different presidential candidates on a somewhat regular basis, more informal. As someone who's gone through this before, I'm very keen on making sure that a Republican wins in 2016. If there's anything that Barack Obama has shown us over the last 6+ years, it is the power and breadth of the presidency. And he has shown us, he has taken that power beyond all possible imagination that our founders had of what that power would be like. But we certainly can't allow a Hillary Clinton to have that power for the next 8 years.
Well, you bring up Hillary Clinton. So glad you did. She's in a bit of a controversy. Not exactly the right way to start off a presidential campaign. You can certainly speak to this, Michelle. What's your opinions of her this current email scandal going on with her and the State Department when she was Secretary of State?
Well, I think it's very likely that Hillary Clinton has committed a criminal act because she was subject to federal record-keeping requirements. I think it's patently obvious that she intentionally chose to evade those regulations. And in light of that, I think she's in real trouble. We just found out from Time magazine today that Hillary hired lawyers. Her lawyers put together a list of names and key search words. Through those 62,000 emails, they went through, they hit a button to conduct a search, and anything that didn't fit those names or those key words were deleted. The emails that she deleted were not opened. No eyes put it. This is what the report says. No eyes looked at them. So what Hillary told us in her Kabuki Theater press conference on Tuesday is that 100% of all government emails were handed over and 100% of personal emails were deleted. So that's pixie dust that she's trying to have all of us believe that there was 100% infallibility on the search term list of her lawyers. It's absolutely impossible that that happened. And so clearly, now Hillary has put herself in a position where there will have to be a criminal probe and the Justice Department, in my opinion, has no other option. They'll have to open up a criminal probe on the former Secretary of State, and her private email server will have to be subpoenaed, and forensics will have to be completed on it.
Now, you running as president, even the people on the GOP side, along with the liberals, went after you. You went through a presidential process. Of course, your emails, as your time as Minnesota senator and as congresswoman, were looked at every detail. Take us through a little bit how through a government person's email, and how that can be easily scrutinized, and how easily someone can mix up their email address so easily and break federal law.
Well, I think, I'm not an expert on the federal records requirements, and I don't pretend to be. The rules that the Obama administration had for their own departments were very clear. The secretary knew those rules. She emailed the employees under her about those rules and admonished them to follow them, to the point where even the U.S. ambassador from Kenya was removed in part for failing to follow the record-keeping requirements on emails. So this is well beyond hypocrisy on Secretary of State Clinton's part. I believe that now she may have moved into a federal criminal jurisdiction, and the question really now is whether the Obama Justice Department will apply equal treatment under the law to the former Secretary of State. We've seen instances where it appears that there are politically selected prosecutions of people who are not in the favor of the White House. For instance, Senator Menendez and others who have been selected by this White House for prosecution. But in this case, Hillary Clinton cannot be above the law. She has to be held to it, just like anyone else. And so she's certainly not starting out on the happiest foot with the beginning of her, what appears to be a very bumpy ride on her way to the White House.
Okay. And I want to bring up you were on the Intelligence Committee as your time as Congresswoman, and our D.C. Bureau put the question to me to ask you, if you had the chance to question Hillary Clinton on Benghazi, what were some of the questions you would have asked her? Because obviously there is a string of emails related to this scandal with Libya that aren't even available. And they, so far today, according to a report by the AP, Chairman Trey Gowdy, who was heading that Benghazi committee, has now subpoenaed Hillary Clinton and her emails. He wants to know where those emails are. What's your opinion on that?
Well, again, I think that it's very instructive what Time Magazine reported today. The fact that Hillary Clinton's lawyers put together a list that has names and keywords on it, and based upon that list and an arrogant presumption of perfect infallibility, they conducted a search and deleted all emails that didn't have that list. Clearly, if I was on the Benghazi Select Committee, or if I was on the Intelligence Committee, I would want to know what names were on the list that the lawyers put together and what were the key words that were on the list when they ran the search. Were the words Benghazi in that list? Was the word video in that list? Hillary Clinton, just because of Benghazi alone, in my mind, is disqualified as commander-in-chief. This was her big test, and she failed it. She failed it both in making sure that those under her employ in the State Department would be kept free from harm. And by that, I have personally seen the notebook that had all of the threats in it regarding Benghazi. There were thousands and thousands of threat warnings that year in 2012 about the dangerous conditions in Benghazi. All of our allied partners had pulled out their teams and their crews because they knew how dangerous this was. Our State Department people asked for more security in 2012 because of the dangerous conditions and because the Benghazi compound had already been attacked numerous times in 2012. Not only were those pleas for help ignored by Hillary Clinton, she also pulled out security that was there. So they were less secure on September 11th, 2012 than even before when the compound was under attack earlier during the year. The second point is that she did not have a plan in place to rescue people in one of the most dangerous parts of the world. So we know now when the attack happened, we were told later that it would take well over 20 hours to even mount any sort of a rescue effort. Well, that was unrealistic, and she allowed that to stand. We don't know where Hillary Clinton was that evening. We don't know who she called, whether or not she did speak to the commander-in-chief, where the president of the United States was. And then we need to know why afterwards she was one of the chief people who continued to perpetuate the lie that it was a video that started the Benghazi problem, when in fact it was a terrorist assault. Hillary Clinton knew literally within minutes of the assault that this was an attack that was underway. It didn't take long for her to know. She knew immediately. She was in Washington, D.C., and no one should forget, in 2008, Hillary Clinton ran a famous ad about a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And in the ad, the phone rang, and the question was asked, who will answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning? And she tried to infer that she would be better prepared to deal with an emergency than Barack Obama. Well, the phone call came at the 3 o'clock hour, only it was in the 3 o'clock hour in the afternoon, not in the middle of the night, and that was Washington, D.C. time, where Hillary Clinton was when Benghazi broke out. So she had every advantage at her fingertips, and yet we saw 4 innocent Americans die, and we saw a cover-up of gargantuan, obvious proportions, and now the jig is up. So she has a lot to answer for regarding Benghazi, but far more than that, now it appears that she's involved in a potential criminal violation and cover-up of what we would call evidence in the destruction of emails on her private server.
Unbelievable. And before we wrap up the part about Benghazi, what is your opinion of your former colleague, Trey Gowdy? How do you think he is handling the investigation, and do you think he is moving swiftly enough in handling that investigation?
Well, I would refer your listeners to a couple of columns written by my friend Andy McCarthy. Andy McCarthy writes for National Review Online. He also writes for PJ Media. And Andy has been talking about the glacial speed that the committee has been running at. The committee, according to Andy, has been constituted for about 10 months. And the purpose of the committee is not to run a criminal investigation. Congress is prohibited from running a criminal investigation. Only the judicial branch can do that, and that's through the, only the Department of Justice can conduct a criminal investigation, and that would be through the executive branch. That must be done. What Congress can do is investigate facts and conduct oversight, and that's primarily a political procedure. I don't mean political in the sense of being pejorative, Republicans against Democrats. What I mean is that the legislative branch has the duty to properly investigate the areas over which it has jurisdiction. For instance, the State Department, whether it is Foreign Affairs or whether it is Judiciary or whether it's the Intelligence Committee. They provide the funding and they make the policy, and they properly need to determine whether the money was spent the way Congress authorized, and second, whether policies were in fact followed. That needs to be done. That's an inherently public process. There's been very few hearings that have been held, and in my opinion, that those hearings should be held soon and quickly, putting all of the evidence on the table for the public to see, and then calling out on the Department of Justice to conduct its own civil or criminal probe.
Certainly, we're going to keep an eye on the Benghazi situation. I don't think this is going to be over. It's certainly going to take a long time, and I think that will be the crucifix, so to speak, on the Obama administration and what is going to finally be on President Obama's legacy. Don't you agree?
Well, I think President Obama's legacy clearly will be the establishment of lawlessness in the United States. In nearly every realm, the president has far overstepped his boundaries as listed in the Constitution of the United States under Article 2. And I think most egregiously recently we have seen that overstepping in the realm of the president issuing executive amnesty to illegal aliens, wherein he is fabricating the creation of work permits for over 5 million illegal aliens in the United States. Once the president has done that, and once the GOP Congress fully funded those 5 million plus work permits, now we will see illegal aliens be granted Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, in addition to the work permits that will allow them access to Medicare benefits, Medicaid benefits, Social Security disability benefits, in addition to numerous other benefits that they'll now be able to take advantage of. Does anyone believe that someone armed with a work permit, a driver's license, and a Social Security number won't have access to the voting booth? In my opinion, this was nothing more than a taxpayer-subsidized voter drive for the Democrat Party for 2016. And I think that clearly that's what the president was trying to do, because in light of Ferguson and all of the racial tensions in the United States today, in part stoked by the policies of President Obama, I don't believe for a moment we're going to see poll workers risk the judgment of the Department of Justice by being accused of racial profiling, by asking anyone to show proof of citizenship papers when they go to file for voter registration. If they have a valid driver's license, if they have a Social Security number, if they have a work permit, I highly doubt any poll worker will be asking for proof of citizenship papers. And I believe that is why we have the potential of seeing an additional 5 million illegal aliens who could be voting in the 2016 election. And that could be enough to throw the election to the Democrat nominee, presumably of which is Hillary Clinton. And to see Hillary Clinton gain office through the votes of potentially 5 million illegal aliens who are not authorized to vote would be truly a travesty and a shame in our system.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, because I think your prediction already came true, because 15 illegal aliens here in the state of California, after a federal probe earlier this week, Michelle, were given amnesty from deportation today, and they are known criminals as well, so they could be potential voters in the upcoming 2016 election. So you certainly know your stuff when it comes to the illegal immigration issue. Now let's move on to D.C. politics briefly. And first question I want to ask you here, a lot of people were shocked that you decided not to rerun for another term and decided to step down last year before the midterm elections last year. Was that because of the gridlock in Washington, D.C.? And I'm not only speaking to Democrats, I'm speaking to Republicans on this issue, because you know what, I've told this my audience many a times that I'm no longer a Republican, that the Republican Party left me, I didn't leave them, and I decided to become a nonpartisan here in the state of California. If there was any other state, I would have become a libertarian, because the GOP is currently not the grand old party anymore. They're surely not showing their conservative roots, especially with Speaker Boehner.
Well, I want to encourage people to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I regularly Facebook and Twitter, and also I have a PAC called Michelle PAC, and I just put a mailing out today for Michelle PAC, and I encourage people to go to michellepac.com. And I talked about that very issue, that it only took 2 terms for the Whigs to lose as a political party and for the Republican Party to take dominance over the Whigs. I don't think any party should get too comfortable. A lot of people are very, very upset by the fact that the Republican Party, which now controls both the Senate and the House, decided they were not going to fight President Obama on his illegal, unconstitutional executive amnesty. In fact, they completely caved and they fully funded Obama's agenda through 2015. So consider this. When Barack Obama came in power, he had a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat president. That's how we were able to see Obamacare and Dodd-Frank go through. Then we had the House of Representatives flipped, and it went into Republican hands. That seemed like we would be able to stop a certain amount of damage happening with a Republican House, but we were told that the Republicans only controlled 1/2 of 1/3 of government. In order to tell conservative members of Congress to be quiet, don't expect much, we don't have enough power. Now when voters gave Republicans control of the Senate, once again we're told we don't have enough numbers, we don't have enough Republican senators to overcome a filibuster. There is a Democrat president, the president has his rights, and we've got to step out of the way. And so now Republicans are busy confirming people like Loretta Lynch is the new Attorney General. She did pass out of a committee in the United States Senate and the Judiciary Committee after she already said she believed Obama's unconstitutional amnesty was just fine with her. In other words, this is going to be Eric Holder Part 2 all over again. So Republicans are not pushing back in any way, and I think that Republicans need to recognize there could be a tremendous backlash against them if they don't properly act as goaltenders and stop what President Obama is illegally doing. So throughout his 8 years, even with Republicans controlling the Senate and the House, Obama still may have his entire agenda 100% fully funded. To me, that's a travesty.
Is that why you decided to step down as Congresswoman, because of all this gridlock? You couldn't get anything done? And you know what? You were known as the Queen of the Tea Party. People have said that many of times. You were the first one to stand up and say, if we take control of Congress, we will repeal Obamacare. But you know what? You're the only person who was coming out saying that. And you know what? For people who say that you broke your promise, you can't exactly tell Michelle Bachmann that she broke her promise if she was the only one who was saying that. She needs the whole party behind her. And the likes of the House leadership, the likes of John Boehner, and even former Majority Leader Eric Cantor, they weren't behind you on it. And why do you think Eric Cantor was voted out of office and the likes of Dave Brat took over his state?
Well, one of the main reasons why I decided to run for President of the United States was to repeal Obamacare. I saw that there weren't very many people on Capitol Hill, and that included Republicans, who had the backbone to actually stand up to all of the special interest groups in Obamacare and repeal that bill and fight for our great health care system. Despite its flaws, America still has the greatest healthcare system in the world, but we're losing it fast because of Obamacare. I could regale your listeners with stories, but we don't have time to do that. I chose not to run. I've given 16 years of my life full time to politics. 2 as a mom at home. We had 5 biological kids and 23 foster kids that we raised. And our foster kids brought a lot of nonsense home in their backpacks. And I was incensed at what I saw. We homeschooled our biological children, and we had them in private school. But in the state of Minnesota, we were prohibited legally from putting our foster children in anything other than the public school. And I was just floored by some of the things that I saw come home in the backpack. And I decided as their mom to fight for my foster children's education. That's really what got me into politics. I wasn't interested in politics. I was a federal tax litigation attorney, and I had enough to do on my plate with all the kids and a business that we started, and I'd started a K-12 charter school. I was a busy person. I didn't need to run for politics. But I was so incensed at what was happening to our nation's education system that I burrowed in, I found out what the problems were, and I alerted people all across the state of Minnesota. We're a very liberal state, Al Franken, for instance, is our U.S. Senator. But in my state, we became the only state that was able to throw out our federal education national standards. And we did that because real people cared about their kids. Liberals and conservatives cared about their kids, and they said, not with my kid you don't. We're not going to teach them this politically correct mash. And so we had a temporary victory, at least in Minnesota. I did that for 2 years, and then I was encouraged to run for the Minnesota State Senate, and I served there for 6 years, and then in Congress for 8 years. So I spent 16 years of my life pouring myself out in public service. And I just felt like I do believe in a citizen legislature, and I do believe in at least self-imposed term limits. And so I pulled out to give someone else a chance. But that doesn't mean that I've left the fight. That's why I'm on your radio show tonight. I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday working on some matters. I'm in Florida today. I'll be giving a big speech on education tomorrow in Florida. I'm continuing to weigh in. I'm continuing to fight on these issues. I'm just doing it from a different perch.
And you know what, Michelle? I'm glad you are doing that. And by the way, that is over in Naples, Florida, speaking at the Eagle Forum luncheon tomorrow. And you're going to be there with the Honorable Phyllis Schlafly, the CEO of Eagle Forum. And please tell her Mr. Miller said hello. I've had the honor of interviewing her on many occasions. And you know what? I can understand your frustration why you decided to leave Congress. You can get more done as a private citizen, Michelle, than you could have as a congresswoman, at least with the current leadership in Congress. I think I'm not the only American here, along with yourself, who is frustrated with the likes of D.C. We tell our D.C. politicians, hey, we want this done. We want you to fight for us, and yet they're not fighting for us.
Well, I think you're echoing the frustration that so many people see, because many, many great people sacrifice to volunteer on campaigns and support local campaigns, and they send people to Washington, D.C., and there are good people there. I want to vouch for there are many, many good people who are sacrificially serving in Congress. There's just not enough. And the problem is, a lot of times Congress can be likened to a big junior high. It's a lot of peer pressure that you get in Washington, and it's very, very expensive to run for office, and money talks. So between money, between the pressure that leadership puts on members, between the negative ads that get run against an individual, at a certain point, people just decide it's not worth it. I'm not going to fight anymore. But for me, I knew why I was running. I knew that I wasn't going to make a career out of being in Washington. I knew who I was. I knew what I believed, and I had a titanium spine. It doesn't mean that I don't know how to compromise. You can't be married 37 years and not know how to compromise. Anybody knows how to compromise, but we're way beyond compromising now. We're talking about a complete and total abdication of our Constitution. And if we abdicate our Constitution, we will no longer look like the gift that the United States was to our generation. And it's changing fast. And we all love America. We all love the freedoms that it's given to us. But in order to continue this life, we have to continue the constitutional freedom. And President Obama chose not to do that. And for some inexplicable reason, the Republicans decided to leave their white gloves on and not fight. This was the time of any time to take off the white gloves and put on brass knuckles and boxing gloves and fight to retain control of our borders and our sovereignty and our Constitution. And instead, unfortunately, the Republicans, together with the Democrats, chose to fund Obama's unconstitutional, illegal executive amnesty. And it will totally change the United States forever. That's not racist to say that. It is to say that American workers deserve to keep their American jobs. Because with 5 million new laborers in the workforce, 5 million new people will be fighting for American jobs, which means employers will bid down the wages and bid down the benefits. So American workers, the ones who are paying the taxes for illegal aliens, they're the ones who are going to be hurt the most. And the children of natural-born Americans will also be the ones who are hurt the most. We have every right to control our borders. We have every right to decide who comes in and when they come in. There is no other nation on earth that is as generous with immigration as the United States. Already today, we allow in over 1 million legal aliens every year. Over 1 million. No other country allows that many people in through immigration. In fact, if you add up the amount of immigration that every other country in the world does, all countries combined, they don't even allow in every country of the world added together as many as the United States does in 1 year. So we're beyond generous. Now the American taxpayer is being taken for a ride as a fool and a chump because we have to provide Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security benefits, Social Security disability payments, in all likelihood food stamps, Obama phones, the whole rest, the gravy train. Obama's rolling out that carpet of entitlements, and the American worker who's suffering already with lower wages is going to have to pay that freight.
Can you stay on with a couple more minutes? I've already spoke to our D.C. Bureau. The Exceptional Conservative Show, for those of you tuning in at the top of the hour, will be delayed, but Ken McClinton has graciously given us some extra time with you. Michelle, do you have a couple more minutes to talk with us?
You know, I wish I did, but I have an event here that I need to go to, but I've really enjoyed my time with you, and I just wish you the best, and I wish your audience the best as well.
All right. Well, keep us informed, and we'd love you to come back on sometime to analyze what is going on in D.C., because I don't think anybody knows it better than you. Real quick, before you go, what is your opinion on the current Iran negotiations going on in Switzerland? Real quick, if you can briefly give us a brief summary of what you think about what's going on.
I sat on the Intelligence Committee. There are only 4 nations in the world that the United States designates as state sponsors of terror: Cuba, Syria, Sudan, and Iran. Of those 4 nations, Iran clearly is the most egregious violator of terrorist acts in the world. This is the one nation that President Obama can't do enough. He is tripping over himself right now to make sure that Iran has the ability and capacity to develop a nuclear weapon. And it isn't just one weapon, it is multiple nuclear weapons. And as we speak, Iran already has control over the capital of Yemen, the capital of Lebanon, the capital of Iraq, Baghdad, and also obviously their own capital, as well as Damascus, the capital of Syria. Iran is intent on being the dominant player in the Middle East. If we see Iran, which is responsible for murdering over 1/3 of all of our American soldiers in Iraq, you heard me right, Iran is responsible for murdering 1/3 of all of our U.S. soldiers in Iraq. If they are this dangerous with backing terrorism now when they don't have a nuclear bomb, imagine what they will do when they have it. We don't even have to imagine, because their leader has already tweeted and stated publicly that once they have a nuclear bomb, their intent is to annihilate the Jewish state. They intend to kill every Jew on the planet, and they're going to begin with killing the Jews in Israel. But they also intend to use that nuclear bomb against the United States. In no universe can I imagine any U.S. president ever desiring to make sure that Iran has a nuclear weapon. And Iran will have a nuclear weapon. I was in the chamber last week when Benjamin Netanyahu came to speak to Congress. As a former member of Congress, I have lifetime privileges of being in the chamber. I was the first person, as a matter of fact, who greeted the Prime Minister when he walked through the double doors to give his speech. I stood right by the doors. I greeted him. I thanked him for being there, and I was one of the last people to talk to him before he left the chamber. He said it rightly. He said this agreement that President Obama is desperate to have for some odd reason, this agreement will pave the way for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And they'll be able to have a nuclear weapon in somewhere from 6 months to 1 year's time. not enough time for the United States to gear up and have a defense. Why do I say that? I say that because President Obama is in the process of hollowing out our U.S. military. He is taking our Navy back to 1917 levels of preparedness. He is taking our Army back to pre-World War II, 1942 levels of preparedness, and he's stripping down our United States Air Force as well. I spoke to experts in December who said that today we have the capability of taking out Iranian nuclear hardware, but potentially by the year 2016, next year, that window may close, and the United States may have so hollowed ourselves out militarily that we may not have the capability of even taking out the Iranian nuclear program. What President Obama is doing to this nation is treasonous as far as I am concerned, and this is more than a bad deal. And I'll end this, and then I need to go. At the White House Christmas at the White House Christmas party, I knew this would be the last time that I would have the occasion to see the president in my capacity as a member of Congress. And so I decided rather than just having light chit-chat, I would have a substantive conversation. So after we took our pictures as families, I turned to the president and I said, Mr. President, you need to bomb the Iranian nuclear hardware, and you need to do it soon before they get the nuclear weapon. Otherwise, the course of world history will change. And then the president said to me in a patronizing, condescending tone, well, Michelle, it's really not that simple. And then he kind of waved his hand a little bit like I was a know-nothing, and he said, but that's okay. And I thought to myself, you know, Mr. President, it's been publicly reported that you miss over 60% of your daily intelligence briefings. I went to my intelligence briefings. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, I put extra time into reading intelligence products so that I would know what was going on. And so I responded to the president, no, Mr. President, this is your watch. And if Iran has a nuclear weapon and bombs under your watch, the course of world history will change. Merry Christmas, Mr. President. And then I left and I walked away. Obviously, the president and I completely disagree on this. But if 535 members of the House and the Senate with one voice would say to the president, we're way beyond sanctions now. Sanctions work to hurt Iran. Sanctions won't stop this nuclear program. The only thing that will stop the nuclear program will be the United States militarily taking out that nuclear program. It's happened before. In Iraq, a nuclear facility was taken out in the 80s. In Syria, a nuclear facility was taken out. In Libya, a nuclear program was halted. We've done this before, and Iran for over 20 years has violated every UN resolution, every deadline they've been given, they've violated. They are clearly on the march to have nuclear weapons, and so many that no nation could ever turn them back. We could see a jihadi power, which is a Shia, that's Iranian. There are two forms of Islam, Sunni and Shia. Sunni is the Islamic State. Shia is Iran. Iran right now is fighting the fight of the Battle of Tikrit against the Islamic State because the Shia Muslims hate the Sunni Muslims and they want to destroy them too. Iran is on the march right now, and this is a religious goal for them. They believe that by bringing this destruction about, that they will usher in their, what they call the 12th Imam, and that's their religious leader. And then they believe that the religion of Islam will dominate the entire earth. We think that sounds far-fetched. It's not even in our capacity to think that any nation would want to do something like that. But that is the belief of the Iranians. And Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, in order to win a battle, you need to know yourself and you need to know your enemy. And here in the United States, we are being stripped of knowing anything about our own country's history, our positive history. All we ever hear is the negative history about the United States. But we also are stripping ourselves of truly understanding who this enemy is, so that every time we see a despicable terror attack, our president says something like, Islam is a religion of peace. He will say that, for instance, with the Jewish kosher market that was attacked in France, He'll say that these were just random people killing other random people. That's not true at all. These are people who are clearly targeting Jews, but anyone who is not of their religious faith. It is the absolute faith of intolerance. That's what radical Islam is, an intolerant faith. And what we have to do is defeat this idea of this intolerant faith. And President Obama, for some unknown reason, doesn't want the American people to know what the true motivations are of the Iranian dictator. I can't imagine for a moment that our president has not been briefed on what the religious motivations are behind the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. But at this point, what I would say to you, from what I have read and what I have observed and from the briefings that I've had, no one knows the thoughts and intentions of a person's heart, but from the words and rhetoric of President Obama and from his actions, they line up very clearly in a pattern to demonstrate two things. President Obama, throughout his presidency, has lifted up the agenda and advanced the agenda of radical Islam, and at the same time, he's cut the legs out of our main ally, Israel. That's just an objective determination of what the fruit has been of President Obama's rhetoric and his actions. And it will come, I believe, with deadly consequences if Iran obtains a nuclear weapon. So I want to thank you so much for having me on tonight, and we'll plan to do this again soon. But I invite people to come and join me at Michelle Bachmann at my Facebook, my Twitter. Go to michellebachmann.com, michellepack.com, Team Bachmann, the different websites that are out there. Google me and come and join my sites, and you can get more regular updates.
Thank you so much, Michelle Bachmann. And if you are in the Naples, Florida area, join the Eagle Forum's 35th annual luncheon. Michelle Bachmann is their keynote speaker, along with Phyllis Schlafly. That's tomorrow, March the 13th. For more information, go to eagleforum.org. Michelle Bachmann, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you.
And once again, that was Michelle Bachmann joining me on the Evan Miller Report yesterday on Thursday, March the 12th. We thank her again so much for joining us. A 40-minute interview with former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. And ladies and gentlemen, Michelle is right when she said that this president cares more about appeasing the Islamic State and the likes of Muslims than he does this country. I could not agree with her more. And ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for listening to the Evan Miller Report this week. Of course, we had a lot of news this week. We thank you for sticking with us this week. And if you missed any of this interview with Michelle Bachmann, it is available on shrmedia.com. Also available on the iHeartRadio app, on the iHeartRadio.com. Search The Evan Miller Show, and you'll see the interview with Michelle Bachmann up on there. For Corey Evan, I'm Jason Miller saying so long from San Diego, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Corey Evans back tomorrow with the SHR Weekend News, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, right here on shrmedia.com. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.